All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining our Hitchhikers webinar on consumer authorization. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're doing immediately following the Winter 21 release. We know it's 22 now. This is our first time doing a release straddling both sides of the years, but we're really excited to dig into our headliners. The first one, as I mentioned, is going to be consumer authorization. Then we're going to be talking about connectors updates in the next one. We're going to be talking about listings modernization, and then we're going to finish up with a webinar on Answers Headless React, and we'll talk more to those later. But I wanted to thank you again for joining. We've got an awesome lineup here with Ariana and Rachel, who are going to take us through some background on consumer authorization, and then we'll follow up with some questions and answers at the end. So definitely, if you have any questions, plug those into the chat or plug it into the Q&A. You can see we've got an agenda here. First, Ariana is going to take us through what is consumer auth, give a little bit of background, give some potential use cases to understand if you're a fit, if your use cases are a great fit. And then Rachel is going to take us through a demo. We'll talk through some of the upcoming webinars and content where you can find out more information, and then we'll finish up with that Q&A. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Ariana.
Thanks, Nick. Really excited to see everyone here in the first session celebrating our Winter 21 release. As Nick mentioned, there is a lot of really cool stuff coming down the line with Winter release, which is available to the general public today. We have some updates to our listings to make it a little bit easier and more transparent to see how your integrations across the web are working. Some new updates to data connectors to make them more flexible, where you can add your own functions as a source, some new transforms to update those data connectors, a brand new way to build a custom Answers UI with Answers Headless React for our React developer community. And finally, the focus of today's discussion, which is Consumer Auth, a really powerful suite of features that allows you to take the power of AI search and bring it anywhere, including locations on the web where that data needs to be secure to only a subset of users. And that'll be what we're talking about today. Now, when we talk about consumer auth, what do we mean? Basically, it relates to scenarios where the data you're trying to make searchable or make accessible is not necessarily public. So we think about this as three general categories of data. The first, public data, is largely what you likely already associate your Yext experiences with. That's any information we want available to anyone on the web. So a great example of this would be maybe you have some location pages up for the various locations of your taco brand. We want that available to the public so that people can look up the hours and services offered at the location nearest to them, and then potentially make a sale by actually going to that location. So more people being able to see that information is pretty much always better. However, there are some scenarios where we wouldn't necessarily want information available to everyone. Those might be a private data type of situation where we want only certain people to be able to access the experience. So an example of that might be like, maybe the company that you work for has a blog for employees, and they only want employees to be able to access that blog because it's about, internal events, upcoming changes, and different things that are relevant to employees. In that case, you might need to log on to be able to access that blog, and people who don't have a login, understandably, can't access that blog. That's an example of a private experience, which falls within the purview of consumer auth. And then finally, perhaps the most complex, but also very interesting, is a permissioned experience, which takes private a bit of a step further. And in this case, with permissioned experiences, different people might have access to different pieces of information. So an example of there might be your employee intranet, where maybe if I work in finance, I have access to one set of documentation about our various accounting and finance procedures. Whereas if I work in engineering, I probably have access to a different subset of the documentation that's relevant to the technical tools that I'm working on. And private and permissioned experiences are really the focus of consumer auth. With that in mind, consumer auth at Yext as part of the Winter 21 release involves a couple of key features that relate to private and permissioned experiences. The first is what we call private sites, which is basically the ability to make a site, like that blog that I referred to, that's only accessible to some people. There's various different ways you can set that up, including using Yext Auth, a Yext way of providing a username and login to your users, they can log in and access that site. Or if there's an existing OIDC tool that you use for logins at your company, like maybe you use Okta to log into lots of different apps, you can use that to access the private site as well. Additionally, another really cool feature of Consumer Auth at Yext is authorized answers experiences. This again is an example of one of those permissioned experiences. In this case, this is the ability to create search where different people might see different search results for the same query, depending on what entities they have access to, so that some people can only see certain documents, other people can only see different documents in search. Really powerful for that internet use case. And then finally, visitor analytics. When you're having different people searching and engaging with your experiences, especially if they're potentially seeing different content, it's really valuable to see those trends at a more granular level. So this gives you the ability to look at data about searches and engagement at the visitor level and understand what the different trends are across different groups of your organization. There's one primary use case that is particularly relevant when we think about Consumer Auth, and that is workplace search, something like an intranet where you're searching for information that's relevant within your organization. So maybe you want to create that private site that's locked down only to a certain set of users so that only people who work at your organization can access your site. You likely want to be able to choose what information appears in search results depending on who's executing the search. So maybe if I work in HR, I want to be able to search for important personnel documentation or various rules and regulations relevant to my department. Whereas if I work in sales, I'm more likely to be searching for something about maybe a competitive analysis or data about how we're performing in the current quarter. What would be really helpful to be able to set up an experience like that would be the ability to ingest external documentation, particularly from sources that already have a permissioning element to them. So something like Google Drive or maybe Salesforce, where, for example, if I have a bunch of Google Docs for my department, I likely already have a list of people who have access to that document and people who do not. And I want to be able to reflect that in my search experience. So being able to pull in those permissions really helps to create an authorized search experience. And then finally, again, I'm going to have people conducting different searches depending on their roles and what they have access to. So being able to look at our analytics at that visitor level is really helpful when we have a workplace search type of use case. With that in mind, it might be the right fit for you to consider Consumer Auth if you're looking to build workplace search or maybe an intranet, particularly if you're interested in building with Yext Sites Developer Preview. Sites is a new Yext tool that allows you to build websites based on your knowledge graph. We currently have some developer previews running for that, so you have advanced access to that to test it out. If you're interested in becoming a member of that developer preview, certainly let your account team know. And if you overall are interested in search for verticals that would require entity level permissioning, so that's again where at the document level, you have some people that should have access to it in search and some people that shouldn't, particularly if you have that permissioning data strewn about a couple of different places where you need to centralize it. Maybe you have some Google Docs, you have some that aren't permissioned yet, maybe you have some in Salesforce. Consumer Auth can be a really great option to bring all of that information together into one authorized search experience. If this sounds like you and you're interested in a potential Consumer Auth use case, we recommend contacting your account team, or you can request a demo at yext.com/demo. There are quite a few advantages of building authorized search with Yext. First off, in general, AI search technology leads with natural language processing. We have multiple algorithms, machine learning things like direct answers, dynamic re-ranking, and more. The ability to take advantage of that in an authorized use case, such as an intranet, is really powerful and certainly a differentiator. The ability to build with a knowledge graph where it's easy to manage entities and permissions, having that one-stop shop where all of your data is stored and managed, and not only to manage what the data looks like, but who has access to it, is really very useful. There's a variety of user roles and configuration options, as well as learning tools, so that people across your organization can get involved in the project to build a workplace search or authorized search experience, whether you're a business representative, maybe a lower code administrator, all the way up to your developer or IT team. And then finally, there's a full platform to facilitate AI search everywhere, not just on your intranet. Once you have your knowledge graph going, you've started bringing together your data, there's lots of different use cases where you could take advantage of that beyond workplace search. Yext has the tools to help you build search, not just in your internet, but maybe on your website, or maybe power some listings across the web. And that one-stop shop can be a really big tool for your team. Now that's a little bit of the background on Consumer Auth. With that, I'm going to welcome to the stage Rachel Adler from our product management department, our resident expert on Consumer Auth, to show us some of those features in action.
Thank you, Ariana. That was a wonderful introduction to these new features that we have, and I am excited to share with you a demo and see how this all actually looks. So first, right now, I am on a Sites page. Sites is part of a developer preview. If you're interested in hosting a page on Sites, please reach out about that. So first, I'm opening up the site. And as Ariana mentioned, you can protect your Yext sites with a method of authentication, including Yext Auth. So you can have all of your users in Yext, or you can also link if you have, let's say, an Okta account or a Google Drive account, you can link that as well. But for today's purposes, we are going to be logging in with Yext Auth. And as you can see, I have my answers experience. And right now I have no authorization set up on the actual answers part. So I've logged in to access the site, but this contains all of my FAQs and that I have configured for this vertical in the knowledge graph, and then all of these Google Drive documents. So right now, this is not an authorized search experience because this is showing every single thing that I have available for users. So now that I have logged in though, Answers does have my identity, so it is able to understand who I am, and I can add authorized search to this experience. So the first step that I need to take for this is going into my Answers platform and Answers configuration, and I'm going to change the authorization type. So we have two authorization types. We have Yext Auth and we have external auth. Yext Auth is great for entities that have been created in the knowledge graph, and the permissions are simply like anybody in the Yext platform with email X, Y, and Z can have access. So I'm going to change the authorization type for my FAQs to be Yext. Those are a good example for that use case. Google Drive documents, however, would be a great example for a external authorization use case. So in Google Drive, I might have a whole suite of emails and a whole list of domains, or maybe it's not Google Drive, maybe it's in Salesforce or whatever external source that might have a complex set of permissions, or any set that doesn't exactly match how we store permissions in Yext today. That would be an example of using external authorization. So I can go ahead and change that, and I click save. And it's also great that this can be done on the vertical level. So if you have certain verticals that you even want public and some of them private, you can have that all in the same Answers experience, but change the authorization scheme on that vertical level. So now, as I said, I logged in with this user, and the user was called Consumer Auth with this email. And for Yext Auth, I have added these access controls. So this is a new built-in role we have called Authorized Content Viewer. And this basically allows you to have a Yext login, but you can't log into the actual platform or view anything in the configuration side. It is just to be able to log in and view this Answers experience. And I'm going to go ahead and I can add whatever set of entities I would like. So right now I'm going to say that I want those 3 entities, and I'll even add an additional one. And I can automatically apply that. And now I can see that I didn't actually add a new one, but you have 3 entities that this user can view on a Yext Auth vertical. So first, just looking at that, you can see that in FAQs, before there was 9 listed, and now there's only 3. So it's also a really quick update. It is super fast, which is awesome. And that shows how the permissions in Yext. So this uses the exact same permissioning scheme that you would normally use to maybe add entity level permissioning for an account manager or an admin and such. Now looking at the external permissioning system, You can see that I right now have this entity, and this is a Google Drive entity type. And we have 3 new fields that allow you to link your external identities to this entity. So you can add one source. So for this, I'm calling it Google Drive, but this can be any string you choose. It could be Salesforce. It's just to identify that for this specific document, that is where we're pulling in the permissions from. So then these are going to be your external authorized identities. So this might be a whole list of maybe any domains that you have. However your permissions are stored in your external system, we can support just a list of emails or anything that you want. So right now I have this as Auth User at webinar.com. And as you can see, because I'm using Yext Auth, or because the user has actually signed in with Yext, that makes it a lot easier. This can all be configured by a developer where you can pass in your external identity and get that into answers. But because we logged into that site initially with Yext, we're able to pass in that Yext ID. So to make this really easy for you, you can actually then tell Yext by passing in that Yext user ID that they have these 2 external identities that I've added. So I've said that Consumer Auth in Google also has the identity Auth User at webinar.com and this. I could add as many external identities as I want. I could say that in Salesforce, they have Auth User at salesforce.com, whatever that may be, basically to just associate those external identities with this Yext user that they've logged into with Yext, using Yext into the site. So now I'm going into my external authorization, and as you can see, I'm now going to go into my Google Drive documents, and I'm going to search, let's say, how can users see additional details? And you can see that one Google Drive document appears. We can use extractive QA, which is a huge benefit of actually searching through Answers versus just searching Google Drive in general. You can take advantage of all of the other features that Answers has to offer. But as you can see, if I actually go right into the Google Drive vertical, only one document is appearing. And that's because I haven't added these permissions to any of the other Google Drive entities, which normally would be done through like a connector system. But let's say right now, for our purposes, I go into another Google Drive document and I want to add another identity, add this identity to another document. I'm going to call it webinar.com. And now you'll see it quickly refreshed that did I spell that wrong? Wow. It should be updating, but we'll see what's happening. Anyway, so that would show you just the entities that you have access to. And another really cool way to do this is you can actually even add blocked identities. So let's say you want everyone in the domain of webinar except for one specific person in that domain, you can add blocked identities and those won't show up. And you can just click right on that and it'll take you right to the Google document page, assuming that you are logged into Google Drive and that you have access to it. So that is authorized search. It can be very confusing, so please reach out with any questions, but it's great because all of this is right now on the Yext platform, but it can be as, you can do as much of it from a developer side as you would like, or have us do the work for you, depending on how much flexibility and how you'd like this set up. The final suite of features that I'd like to show you is actually in analytics. So this is completely opt-in, but if you choose to turn on, visitor analytics, then you can actually track at the visitor level their answers and pages events. So let's say that I right now want to track, let's say, answer searches and clicks, and I want to dimension it instead of by visitor ID. Let's say I want to dimension it by, we have different options. So visitor ID and ID method are available. And this is also available not just to authorized search. You can actually just, any developer, if they want to pass in an object of visitor ID and ID method, we can store that for them. If you're using Yext Auth, we, as said, if you opt in, we can store those as well as attach it to the visitor email and visitor name. So let's say I'm attaching it to visitor email and I apply the changes. You'll actually be able to see that There we go. We have lots of sample data. You can actually see by the visitor email what their metrics are. And this is a really cool way to actually understand how users are using it in market. Maybe you want to see if users logging in with Google Drive are more inclined to use your product than your Salesforce users, or seeing if there's a certain power user that you weren't aware of. So it really gives you insights into how users are using your search experience and interacting with your data. So that is all I have right now, but I am happy to take any questions, and I'm excited to hopefully onboard some new customers with these new features.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was really awesome to see those Consumer Auth features in action. I'm sure everyone has some questions. They're excited to learn more about it. For those who are interested in learning a little bit more about consumer authorization, we have available a lot of new content related to the Winter 21 release. There's a new Hitchhikers module that you can do to train yourself on Consumer Auth, several new guides that give you the step-by-step tools you need to implement. You can check out the release notes for the Winter 21 release, not only to learn about Consumer Auth, but the 60 or more additional features that became available today as part of general access. Also, feel free to check out the blog post as well as new web pages on yext.com, highlighting some of those key elements. And if you have any further questions, particularly as you're trying to implement some of these new features, definitely check out the community at Hitchhikers, hitchhikers.yext.com to learn a little bit more. We do have some upcoming events with the Winter 21 release items. Beyond this, particularly our headline items, that we have more webinars later this month and into February. So please keep an eye out. If you're looking to learn more about the connectors updates, there's a interactive workshop on the 19th. If you want to learn more about listings modernization and how you can get a little bit more flexibility and insight into your listings across the web, there is a webinar on that topic on the 26th. And then first week in February, on February 2nd, you'll be able to see what you can build with Answers Headless React, which is a new suite of React tools that allows you to build a fully custom Answers UI in a variety of different unusual use cases. So some really cool stuff coming down the line there. And with that, I'm going to open the floor to Q&A.
Awesome. Looks like we've got a couple of questions here. Here's one that we addressed on the webinar, but I think is worth hitting again. If someone is interested in learning more about Consumer Auth or thinks they fit the use cases, where is the best place that they can go to get information, or who should they reach out to?
Yeah, I can take that. That's a great question. So if you are an existing Yext user and you have an account team, strongly recommend reaching out to them, let them know that you're interested in Consumer Auth and that you'd like to learn a little bit more about how it can be relevant to your account. If that's not the case and you're new to Yext, welcome. We recommend reaching out and potentially setting up a demo that's custom to the things that you're interested in. So you can check out yext.com/demo and give us a little bit more information, and we can be in touch.
Cool. We've got one question here. Are these updates on Hitchhikers, including headless React? I can take this one. Depends. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it depends exactly which area you're looking for certain things. For example, I know headless React has some guides up and some documentation as well. So with every release, we're always updating the Hitchhiker site. That can be tracks. We've got community posts, obviously, for every single release item. And then we'll also have a number of guides or potentially blogs as well for each of these areas. So definitely recommend exploring the site, and then we make sure to update all of that content with every release. I see we've got another question here. With regard to the private sites, I see someone specifically asking about Okta. Are there any other popular SSO options that we can use on top of Okta? Is it really any option? Rachel, do you want to talk to that one?
Yeah, definitely. So it is really any option that you would like. You can configure to use private sites. Um, there is a small caveat that if you are using just private sites and you'd like to use Okta or any external IDP, then we can't directly integrate with authorized search. But if you would like to only use private sites, we can do that. Or another option is you can just use an SSO integration where we can pull your users can actually log in with Okta, but then actually have users in the Yext platform as well to use Yext Auth and also make this a really easy process. So it all kind of depends on what you're looking to do. But the short answer is yes, we can support any type of IDP that you already have.
Cool. We've got one here with regard to visitor analytics. Looks like this person is essentially wondering if there are any privacy concerns around visitor analytics or how we get around some regulations like GDPR. Get around is maybe not the right word. They're like how we play with some regulations like GDPR.
Yeah, so we are only collecting data if you opt into this feature. So we are actually not storing anything unless you tell us to. So that is how we are kind of handling the privacy and security concerns. If you have any questions, you can reach out. But of course, if privacy and security is a concern, you most definitely do not have to use the analytics feature. And if you don't use the analytics feature, then it's not like Yext is collecting it and just not showing it to you. Like we won't collect any of the data or store or have any of that.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have here today. Of course, if you do have any questions in the future, absolutely feel free to reach out. A great place to reach out is the Hitchhikers community. You can also, of course, always reach out to your account teams. If you have any questions, we look forward to hearing from you, and we really look forward to seeing some of the amazing things that you all build with Consumer Auth within workplace search or any other use cases that you may see fit within your organization. With that, I wanted to thank all of you for joining. I want to thank Ariana and Rachel for putting together an awesome webinar. And we hope to see you on some of the upcoming webinars for some of our other headline features of the winter release.